This is episode number 167. Today, we're featuring Susan Blackwood and Howard Friedland.
This is the PleinAir Podcast with Eric Rhoads, publisher and founder of PleinAir magazine. In the PleinAir Podcast, we cover the world of outdoor painting. Called PleinAir, the French coined the term, which means open air or outdoors. The French pronounce it plein air. Others say plein air. No matter how you say it, there is a huge movement of artists around the world who are going outdoors to paint. And this show is about that movement. Now, here's your host, author, publisher, and painter, Eric Rhoads.
Thank you, Jim Kipping, and welcome to the PleinAir Podcast. I hope everybody is safe and well quarantined. These are interesting times. I have a few housekeeping announcements for you. First off, due to coronavirus, the PleinAir convention has been moved to August 11 through 14, and it's moving to Santa Fe, New Mexico. Good news, because this is our first summer PleinAir convention. And so people who normally can't go because it's not in the summer, they can come. And I'm proud to announce that Kevin McPherson is going to step in and do the pre-convention workshop. We have some more announcements coming up as we kind of get our act together. This is all kind of very sudden, of course. The best thing, though, is the weekend we end is the beginning of Indian Market, which is the big event, the big summer event in Santa Fe. It draws thousands. It's going to be a really great time to be there, so you might want to extend your stay. Of course, it's the best time of year to paint. You can learn more at pleinairconvention.com. Also, the PleinAir Salon usually gives its award at the PleinAir Convention, the $23,000 in cash awards. So we've extended the competition. We're going to be doing more competitions. We're going to do one a month to catch up. So we'll be doing an April, a May, and a June. I guess that's not four more, it's three more. And then we will have the final judging before the convention. So you have an opportunity before the end of the month to get your entries in, more chances to win. And it's now monthly. So check it out at pleinairsalon.com. I should mention we've been doing free videos of art instruction on the Streamline Art Video Facebook account. Just go to Facebook, Streamline Art Video, and follow. Those will pop up for you. And then while you're in quarantine, you can watch some of the videos that we've been putting out there for free. I've also posted a lot of other helpful things like art marketing things and so on. Speaking of art marketing, I'll have art marketing questions in the Marketing Minute after the interview. And the Marketing Minute now has its own podcast as well. In case you can't listen to this one, you can listen to that one. Tell your friends. Let's get right to our interview with the Lovebirds, Susan Blackwood and Howard Friedland. Susan Blackwood and Howard Friedland, welcome to the PleinAir Podcast.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Yeah.
With you.
Well, thank you. It's great to be here with you, too. This is unusual because typically a podcast is an interview with a single individual, but because the two of you are melded together as one, we're going to do both of you at once.
A good idea.
So I'm going to start out by telling everybody how we met, because it was, maybe you could tell them.
Well, I think the first time that we met, we were at the Greenhouse Gallery at one of their shows that they used to have. I forget exactly what they called it, but you were the guest speaker.
The salon.
The salon, that's right. And you were the guest speaker, and after your speech, we got to chat a little bit and actually shared an elevator.
Wow, what a memory.
We made that connection. And then, more importantly, we got an invitation to your first foray into PleinAir events. It was even before the PACE. It was in Austin. It was at the Wizard Academy, and we were a group of wonderful artists that we had such a great time. I think you were just dipping your toe into the idea of having these events.
Well,
and we were very fortunate to be invited.
I was very fortunate to have you. If you remember, the concept originally, this was a group of artists who just got together to paint. There was no fee attached to it. There was, I don't think there was. Maybe there was, but I guess we had to pay for food. But the idea was that we as artists, more folks like you than me, because I'm not on the professional circuit, but the idea was that when we were out at events, I remember being at the Carmel PleinAir thing and sitting around a table with some of the artists, and they said, we can't paint next to each other because we're each trying to sell our paintings, so we don't want the same scenes, and we don't get to spend any time together. This is the one time when we're together for drinks, and I thought, wouldn't it be fun to have everybody together and paint for a week? And so I kind of put the word out. I think you guys got the word, and then who did we have on that trip? Do you remember?
Well, Jeff Legg was there, and I think Louis Escobedo was there.
He was,
Yes.
yes.
And Carolyn Anderson was there.
Carolyn Anderson, yeah.
But she got sick and spent the entire time in her hotel, in her room.
Was John Lasseter there? I think he was. Yes, John Lasseter.
And Todd Williams.
Todd Williams, right.
And,
Peter Miller.
Todd Reifers and Peter Miller.
It was a good group.
CW, I think CW Mundy was there.
Jerry Berry.
CW, you're right.
He might have been there, yeah. And
Jerry
Berry.
Oh, yeah.
And his wife.
Yep.
Jeannie.
And Jeannie. Yeah. Who else? I don't want to leave anybody out now because
there
might be hit or miss.
I think originally there were 7 people invited, and I was getting phone calls of, hey, how about this person coming along? And because at the time there was nothing like that. Nobody had ever really done any plein air retreats, so to speak. Now everybody's doing them. But so that was the first Publishers Invitational, I think is what I called it. And then now this year in the Adirondacks, we're celebrating 10 years in the Adirondacks. So actually we've been doing it 11 years.
Wow.
Fantastic.
Wow. Now that we live in Arkansas, maybe we can make it out for that.
I'd like that very much. I don't know. I don't know about you guys, but my hair is maybe a little bit different color than it used to be back then.
Yeah,
I have silver streaks, or what are they? Highlights.
I have a painting hanging in the world famous artist cabin that I did that week. It was an old Texaco station. Do you remember that?
I do
too.
Yeah.
I think we all painted that one.
I think we all did.
I have a couple that I've kept aside. Yeah. It was great.
So let's for the benefit of everybody listening, why don't we kind of start out with your stories because you guys are one of the successful couples that do this together, and there are quite a few of them. But you guys kind of did it early on. Let's kind of figure out how you got together. How did this begin?
Well, let's see. I was living in Taos, New Mexico at the time that Susan and I met. My neighbor across the way from my house had to leave to go. He was one of the Taos Indians, one of the natives there, and he was an actor. And he was cast to play Tashtego in the Moby Dick version with Patrick Stewart, and they were filming it in Australia. So he and his wife and little girl had to leave for the summer. He asked me if I would watch their house. And they said, if you want to have some of your artist friends come, you have them stay at our place, and that'd be great. So I started inviting a lot of artists that I knew come paint with me in Taos. And I was good friends with Karen Vance, wonderful Colorado artist. I called her and I said, how would you like to come and paint with me in Taos and bring your husband Jim? And she said, well, Jim has to work. What if I bring my sister Susan, who's a wonderful artist? I said, sure, bring Susan. And so the time came, everybody got together, and Susan and I hit it off right away. I don't want to go into too much detail about all the details about it.
No, let's get into the juicy details. All right, Let's turn the PleinAir podcast into an X-rated.
Actually, those 5 days we were so focused and so excited about the art and talking art that Howard and I would slip away for walks, and about the most passionate we got was holding hands.
Yeah.
But
that's about as juicy as that was.
Yeah, but
anyway,
my sister said that after 5 days of painting, she noticed that our easels had been getting closer and closer together. And the last day we were standing on a mesa and we couldn't stop talking to each other. So our shoulders were touching. He was facing one way, I was facing the other. And we were doing our last painting. But that was the beginning of the romance right there.
The thing was that she lived in Bozeman, Montana. I lived in Taos, New Mexico. And in those days, this is going back 1997, and email and the internet and Skype and all that kind of stuff was yet to come.
No, it was long-distance phone calls, right?
Yeah,
right.
long-distance phone calls.
Where we got the phone cards from Costco for 2 cents a minute.
Well, anyway,
it was after midnight.
While we were in Taos, we painted at Walt Gonski's wonderful little compound and the Taos Church, and I introduced her to Laura Robb and all the terrific Taos artists, and we just hit it off. And then she had scheduled a workshop in France. Well, actually, it was in England a couple of weeks after we met, and so she was going to be gone for the next 7 weeks. And so we were going to have to put that little romance on hold. But
but I was in New York at the gate, ready to board my international flight, and they used to have phone booths right at the gate. So I'm sitting there thinking, 7 weeks, man. And then I thought, you know what? I should test drive him and see if he likes to travel. So I called him up. And I said, can you get an airline ticket? Can you get a passport? Can you meet me in 3 weeks? I'll be done with my workshops in 3 weeks, and we can tour Europe.
So my sister-in-law worked for British Air at the time, and she was able to tap into some terrific prices on airfare over to London. So she got me a really good ticket, and I was ready to go. I started studying my Italian because I knew we were going to be going to Venice. And
he picks up languages really fast, and so by the time he got over there and we got to Italy, he was able to say little short sentences, and I was amazed, very impressed.
Anyway, so I went over, and she finished her workshop. As soon as I got over my jet lag, we headed off to Venice, and from there, we went to France first because Susan's friend, who was putting on workshops in France, wanted us to teach a workshop, and that coming April. So
was that Kevin?
She was showing us all.
No,
it was a woman, Sunny Reed.
Sunny Reed.
Oh yeah. Okay.
And she did Sunny Lifestay. She was Sunny Reed then, but she's Sunny. Yeah. Lifestay, and she has international tours, and she did that for 30 years, and in France. And this was way before everybody else was doing it.
So in the Provence area.
So we interviewed with her, and she showed us some sites, and we really liked everything. And then off we went to Venice,
and the rest, as they say, is history.
Yeah. His art history.
And that's his art history. Yeah.
So had you guys been single before, married before? Does it matter?
I had been married before and been single for about 7 years, and decided, you know what? Maybe I'm just fine being single. I'm outgoing and I have a lot of friends and I'm happy. And then here comes Howard, and it was like, oh. Well, I think I really like this guy. And Howard had never been married before, so
I had some close calls, but I never actually tied the knot. So, and at that time, neither one of us were seeing anybody, so it was fortunate. Neither one of us had children.
Yeah, so we fit like gloves. I mean, it was, when you're with another artist who speak the same language, you're thinking the same direction. And I said one of the criteria is I had to like an artist's style if I was going to be married to him. Well, the interesting thing is that when I would go to my sister Karen Vance's house and be with her for a few days, I'd wander the house looking at all of the paintings that she would buy from other artists. And I kept picking up these paintings and shouting at Karen, "Who did this painting?" She'd say, "That's that guy, Howard Friedland." Oh, okay. So I fell in love with his brushstrokes before I fell in love with him.
One of the things I think you'll appreciate this. One of my pickup lines was when we were in Taos on these walks.
Yeah.
I said, "Even though you live in Bozeman and I live in Taos, we should stay in touch because we could start marketing together."
And that really, he hit.
That was my pickup line.
That was the sweet spot for me because he's talking hard. He's not coming on to me. And now I find out that it's a pickup line, you know?
Yeah, now you find out.
And we've been marketing
So yeah, that was in 97, right?
Yeah.
97,
Yeah,
right?
we got married in 98. So eventually I decided I would move up to Bozeman. And I think it was how long? 2 weeks after I got there, I proposed.
Yeah.
It
was Valentine's
Day. And then how many months after that?
Well, we got married in a month and a half, 2 months later in April.
So it was a pretty quick engagement.
But we knew. We just knew. You know, when you've lived that long, you kind of know what fits and what doesn't. And yeah, we took a chance, but it's been phenomenal. And we have marketed, oh my gosh, having that support and encouragement and someone cheering you on. One of the things that we found as a couple that's really very, very important is there's no competition between us. If one gets into the show, the other one doesn't feel left out or abused or ignored. We cheer each other on because we feel like we both won. And that's really important with couples. And I think artist friends in general, you just can't be competitive with each other.
One of the important things that we did in the very beginning, I think it was on the drive home we got married in Denver actually. So on the drive home, actually we cut our honeymoon short because we wanted to do a Carol Anderson workshop. And the date was, so we ended up going to Butte instead of going home from our honeymoon and took a workshop from Carol Anderson. And then one of the things we did on that drive was we decided we were going to make a paradigm, which is really nothing more than how we saw our lives at that moment and how we wanted to see our lives in 5 years, in 10 years. And we made a list of things about getting into certain galleries, getting into shows, getting how many awards we wanted to get, and how, all these different things. We were just playing and making up dreams that we wanted to see turn into reality in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. And we really put it out there. We threw it way out, like fly fishing, and not knowing exactly how some of these things would become real. We just started noticing over the years that check. All these things that we just threw out there were happening.
Yeah, even now, 22 years, our anniversary is next month on the 19th, yeah. And even now, after 22 years of marriage, some of those paradigm things are happening still. And it's like part of our consciousness is working toward it, part of it maybe that we're working toward it, but it's just, I think it's so important to put down goals and dreams and throw it out there way beyond what you think is possible. Just throw it out there.
And you really do need to do that and to manifest it and to read it often, to think about it often, and what it tends to just kind of happen. I mean, you're kind of knowing those things are in the back of your mind, you're kind of rearranging things in your life to try to gear towards those things. But sometimes it happens on an unconscious level.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. We feel.
We never would have guessed in a million years how far we had come from the day we wrote those things down, you know, and a very short time, 5 years. Yeah, well,
we started seeing things right away within a year or two, but there was the easy things, you know, that we can accomplish that. And then it just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And, you know, the thing of it is, I think it's real important to look at the paradigms periodically. We've talked about that since we moved to Arkansas. This was a huge change for us coming from Montana down to Arkansas, leaving behind the locals that have been so supportive, the regional artists and local collectors, and coming to an area that some people know us on a national level, but basically we're just one of the crowd here, and then slowly getting re-recognized again and becoming useful in the art community down here. But for us, we realized that now that the last boxes have been unpacked and our studios are set up, now is the time that we really need to pull out the paradigm and reevaluate and add to it. You know, what are we going to do in the next 2 years, 5 years, 10 years?
Well, I want to get into talking about painting and some very specific things about plein air. But before we do that, I'm curious. I remember a time when you guys either showed me. I think you showed me your studios being built, your ultimate studios. I think I saw pictures of them in construction, and then later when they were built, I think this was kind of almost all before Facebook. And so you were pretty committed to Bozeman. What prompted the change to move to Arkansas? Was that because Jeff Legg moved there?
No, he's just a bonus.
He was influential.
Yeah.
We, by the way, that studio that we ultimately built was, number one, a tremendous source of income, because we would have not only art classes and workshops there, but every summer we invited the top plein air, still life, and figurative artists to come every August for a workshop. And we would fill up 2 weeks of workshops with the same teacher, 2 different groups every year. And we've had not all, but, you know, a lot of the top well-known painters come and teach there. And,
including Jeff Legg.
Yeah, Jeff Legg was one of them.
Elizabeth Brown and Carolyn
Anderson, Matt Smith, you know, all the known artists. So that studio, it was big.
It paid for itself. And then
it paid for itself.
Yeah.
But the thing was, we're getting a little bit older, and the snow is still flying in Bozeman as we speak. So shoveling driveways every day was getting a little bit.
8.5 months.
Yeah, 8.5 months of it. But we loved that area to death. But
it was time.
We just thought it was time to look for a little bit more moderate climate. And a lot of our artist friends were finding terrific deals. Real estate in Bozeman is getting pretty high, so we were able to get a really good price. And we figured Mark Hansen moved south, Jeff Legg moved south. A few of our other artists were moving to areas where the real estate market was really, you know, very affordable.
Favorable,
we thought favorable. Yeah, let's start looking, you know. And so we visited Jeff and looked around some houses. We came a few times, loved the area. The Ozarks are just gorgeous, especially in the fall. It's unbelievable. We came in October first time.
Spring. Right now it's so beautiful.
Flowers are starting to come out already, and
trees are flowering.
blooming. Yeah. So, and it's kind of a hub in a sense, because the states surrounding where we live in the northwest corner, where Bentonville is. That's the Walmart hub, where Walmart is. And so they have a fabulous museum called the Crystal Bridges Museum. All the listeners should look it up online. Alice Walton, one of the Walmart heirs, started with her fine collection of early American art, and they have, you know, all kinds of wonderful.
Yeah, it's a fabulous museum. A friend of mine is director there, and Alice has just done so much for art. Yeah. And I love Alice. Alice has been a subscriber to our magazine for a long time. I've not met her. Not met her. I'm looking forward to that. So let's talk about painting, because that's why people tune into this. And first off, you guys have both been around as artists for quite a while, and you have had you've had things the way they were before this plein air movement kind of started, and now it's blossomed pretty heavily. Talk about the contrast. What was it like? What are the pros and cons? How are you feeling about that all today?
Well, I started as a little girl. My dad and mom were artists, and my dad would take us out, and we would put our little watercolor tablets on the picnic table at some lake, and we would paint. And it was a solitary experience. I remember as I grew up in college, one summer I had a teacher that forced us to paint outside. For me, most of it was studio until Phil Austin came to visit. Fabulous watercolorist. He's no longer living, but he came to visit for a couple days, and he said, "Grab your brushes, let's go out and paint." And I thought, what? And I sat right behind him, and I watched how he applied it and the things he thought about. We talked about his painting, and I painted something different, but that experience brought back all the memories of when I was a child, and I thought, I got to do this. So I devoted one day a week for an entire summer. Man, no, I think I did it for an entire year. I had a girlfriend who would sit in the car and turn the heater on to paint, and that was a solitary thing. It was really hard to find somebody to do it. And there wasn't the equipment. The old French easel was that was heavier than can be. And so hiking around with that was really crazy. What I see is the equipment that's available now is unbelievable. It's just so great. And of course, we buy every single thing that comes out.
Of course. And you should. And the vendors appreciate it. I think to that point, it's really important to do that. I do the same thing, and I spend far too much money, and my wife will, well, let's just say that it's probably something I shouldn't be doing. But you're always looking to get the next best thing to see is this one going to be a little better for me, and then you stabilize on something that really works. And everybody keeps coming up with these innovations, so we need to encourage these people and help them.
Absolutely. I say to Howard, don't buy me diamonds, buy me art supplies.
Well, if you had diamonds, they just get paint on them anyway.
I know, what's the point?
Well, for me, it was, when I started out, I came from a commercial art background. I was an art director on Madison Avenue for years, and then I moved down to Miami, Florida, and worked in advertising there. But when I moved down, I decided I went to, originally I was at the High School of Music and Art, which is a fantastic high school in New York, and we had everything from painting in oils, watercolor, tempera, graphic design. And so I went into the graphics end of things in college. And then, but when I moved down to Miami, that itch to get back into fine art started to hit me. And I started with there was a school called the Miami Art Center, and I did night classes while I was working in advertising. And so most of what I did in the beginning of my painting experience was studio work. I did figurative and still life. I didn't do much landscape because the Florida landscape didn't really appeal to me that much. But at a certain point back in '82, I moved to, I used to get all the art magazines, and I would see galleries that were showing the kind of art that I liked, fashion and some other things. And a lot of them were in New Mexico, the Fenn Gallery. And so I decided to take a car trip with my then girlfriend out to New Mexico and check out what was going on there. And I saw some of the galleries were representing artists that did representational paintings. And I said, someday I'm going to move here and get into galleries. And so I finally did move out there. And I didn't really have much experience with plein air or landscape painting at all. So I went into the Wadel Gallery and started seeing Walt Gonski and Rod Goebel and about all those Taoist painters that were painting such beautiful, vibrant landscapes, and it just knocked me over. I just said, I got to start getting out there and practicing landscapes. But I had my equipment, and I would drive around, just get in my car and drive around, and I had no clue about what would make a good landscape painting, none at all. So I'd look for things that seemed like it would be something like Walt Gonski or Rod Goebel as far as subject matter. And I would say, I'm going to try my hand at painting this. And I used them kind of as a model as to the style that I felt most comfortable with, the loose kind of impressionistic painterly style.
Juicy
brushstrokes. And I just started doing it until I started to get an eye for the landscape, the New Mexico landscape, and what appealed to me more than what I thought other artists would be painting. And slowly I started to build up my confidence. And at that time, I was a pure plein air purist. Painting from photos was a no-no. I just didn't think that was the way to go at all. So for the first 10 years, at least, of my landscape painting was strictly going out and painting different little New Mexico towns, and with some other artists that I had met in that area, Robert Schuster, Jeff Otis, and some of the other painters. We'd get together and go to these little Hispanic little towns, and the churches and the adobes and all that kind of stuff was fantastic. And that's really how I learned to paint plein air. Eventually, I started to realize, once I started getting into some galleries, that they wanted bigger work. And so I had to teach myself how to interpret photographs as if actually I was painting in plein air.
You use your studies.
So I would use my studies, and I would, with the photographs, I would start working on some bigger pieces. And then the plein air events weren't really happening much when I was doing mostly plein air.
There really weren't any. I mean, I started Plenary magazine 300 years ago. There were there were I think there were maybe 2, maybe 3 plein air events in the entire United States. And now there's over 300 of them.
Yeah, this was the early, to mid 80s that I'm talking about, and then when I started getting into the 90s, that's when I started working in studio more and from photographs. But yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, now they're all over the place. Unfortunately, doing these events, these week-long events at my age, it really takes a lot out of you. So
well, let's talk about that. There's 2 or 3 things you talked about I want to probe into, and then Susan had started to say something. I think first off is, what do you tell people? You said you had to learn how to translate your studies and then photos into studio paintings. What do you tell people in terms of how they can learn to do that? Is there a method to it? Because
absolutely.
Okay, what is it?
Well, first you have to scale whatever you're doing. Make sure that you're dealing apples and apples with what you're doing. Also, when you have photos, sometimes you want to eliminate. You want to make it a painting, not just a photocopy. You have to eliminate things. You have to translate things. Photos, everybody knows that they don't really capture a full range of color. For instance, if you're photographing something, I'll give you an example. Some of my students in a class will be working from a photo, and they'll see, let's say, a green bush in the photo, and the shadows of that green bush are all kind of there's no detail, or they're kind of black. They go black or purple or whatever the printer decides it wants to make them, or whatever your screen says it wants to make it. You have to realize it's really a green bush, so the shadow's got to be green. It can't be black or purple. You have to think. But let me back up. By painting outdoors a lot, your eye sees thousands of times more than what a photo can reproduce. So when you're looking at something with your own eyes, especially outdoors, there's a scintillating energy that goes into your brain through your eyes, and there's a kind of an energy, an electrical force almost. When you translate that into a flat photograph, that's gone. All you have is some sort of facsimile of what you actually saw. How many times, especially when we were photographing with film, you take rolls and rolls and rolls of film of something that you looked at and it was breathtakingly exciting, and then you look at the photos and you say, "Why did I photograph that?" You know?
But you know
so
what?
you have to be able to recall what that energy was when you actually saw it. And by doing these little painting studies, these PleinAir studies, color studies, and rely on those, not the photo, for more accurate color, and rely on some sketches and some notes that you might take about what excited you about that particular scene, because it may or may not be there. It's a skill that has to be developed over time, trusting your memory, trusting your instincts about what's in your brain, what's left in your brain from that experience of that scene, and make it your own. Do whatever you have to do to get that color to harmonize, to get that light to be as brilliant as you remember it being, or whatever that mood was. If it's an overcast, dull mood, you have to know enough about your palette in order to be able to push and pull it to give you back what you actually felt when you saw that scene. So I don't know if that answers your question.
It does. Susan, you started to say something about that.
Well, when I first started, because I had been doing this on my own my whole life, but when I started teaching this, I told my students that first we would just go out and take photographs, and then the next week we'd come back with the photograph and work from the painting. And I had realized the same problem that Howard was having. And again, living in Bozeman was when I really got my classes going. And that was 30 years ago. I mean, you had a few weeks in the summer, literally a few, that you could go out and paint. And the ladies that I had in my classes just didn't want to go out in snowsuits and big boots and paint in the snow. So I would have them take photographs, but I got them into the habit of taking two photographs. One was overexposed and one was underexposed, or three actually, and then one was just the way the camera was, because if they needed any detail in the shadow, they would get it. Or if they needed more color in the light, by underexposing it, you would get it. But that wasn't, that was just a Band-Aid on the issue. And so I kept wanting to take people outside, and I would as much as I could in the summer. But one year I broke my toe. I was doing a portrait and from a model, and I was barefoot. Don't paint barefoot. And I ran around the front of the easel, caught my toe, broke my big toe, laying in bed with this cast on my toe wrapped around, not really a cast, but, couldn't walk on it. I'm thinking, okay, I'm 45 years old. What is it that I haven't done that I really, really want to do with painting? And my heart's desire was to go back to Europe and paint, but I didn't want to go by myself. So that was how I decided I was going to start taking artists to Europe, and so I could paint with them. And that was, oh my gosh, it was in 94, I think I broke my toe. And that became such an experience to be able to paint every day in a beautiful place. And of course, here we can paint almost year round now outside. But the experience was when I first got these people going over there, I didn't even want to take anything. I wasn't really doing oils. I dabbled with it, but I took my watercolors because that was real easy. You could just sit with a watercolor in your lap and hold your palette, and away you went. So when Howard and I got married and we started going outside, I was doing watercolors all the time, and he was doing oils. I would get done faster than he did, but that was because it was watercolor. And then 5 years later, I just had to find out who I would be in oils. So I switched and started doing all my PleinAir and all my studio work in oils, and found as much as watercolors expresses the light values and the mid-tone values, the oils you can get so rich in your dark. So each medium became a treasure to paint outside. I don't know if that answered the question, but
I don't even remember what the question was.
yeah.
I think go ahead, please.
Well, the way the PleinAir has changed from many, many years ago, I was always amazed that the reason the Impressionists got started, one of the reasons was the invention of the tube, because with a portable tube, they could carry their paints outside instead of having to have an assistant that was mixing their paints while they were painting, or little bags of pigskin that carried the pigments in them. And that was one of the reasons why they could go outside. And I always thought, what a gratitude we have for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's some of the lessons in this for people who might be new to this or listening is that number one is you got to paint outside a lot before you can paint from photographs, because if you don't, you're never going to be able to capture what feels real. And I've said this on the podcast many times, but I was actually, when I was in Russia a couple of weeks ago, I was with Nikolai Dubovik, who's a Russian master at the Serkov Institute. Yeah. And we walked into this art gallery, and in the lobby of the art gallery, they had paintings from local people that were for sale. And I walked up to three of them, and I said, I think those three were definitely done from photographs. He says, yes, absolutely. And then we asked, and yes, they were. You could tell. And because they lie there, they look flat. So your best advice for painting from photographs, other than getting outdoors and painting, is what? Is there something that you try not to do or something you try to do?
Well, one of the things I tell my students, you can paint a painting from life that looks like it was painted from a photograph, or you could paint a painting from a photograph that looks like it was painted from life. So a lot of it has to do with
experience.
Yeah, experience and confidence, and just doing it a lot. Just getting out there and putting in the hours. But the key is really enjoying being out there, really loving the experience of listening to the birds, listening to, seeing wildlife. Hopefully it's not a grizzly, which I could tell you stories about.
Well, let's hear it. Let's hear the grizzly story.
Wait. Before we go on, I want to say that one of the things that I find all the time when I paint outside, there's a completely different experience emotionally for me because of the wind, like Howard said, the bird singing, the sun, how it's moving while we're painting. And when we're painting outside, when I look at my paintings that I've done outside, I remember all those experiences. And I'm missing that when I'm working from a photograph. And I try to translate that into a photograph. Howard has it.
One of the, not only just listening to the birds, but when you travel overseas, like painting in Venice, you're set up on the street, and all of a sudden you smell something coming out of the window, and it's somebody making a wonderful lunch, and then they put on opera, and you smell that smell of of the wonderful cooking and listen to what they have on the radio, the
And the
opera,
church bells.
and the church bells going, and the gondoliers coming down the canal singing to their customers, "Oh, solo mio." I mean, that's what life is all about, being in it, being in it and around it. And people who are standing in the same place, like for a couple of hours, like we do when we're painting and focusing and concentrating on a particular painting that we're working on, see so many things go by, whereas the average person just walking down the street, they're missing out on so much. You just see life go by, and hopefully you're concentrating on what you're painting, but the things that go on while you're painting around you are amazing.
Yeah,
Well,
and I think the key is to for me, I'm more of an emotional painter. I want to put emotion in my painting. So I try, when I'm looking at painting outside or any painting really, I try to ask myself first, what emotion am I feeling? And then according to that emotion, those are going to be the colors I choose, even the sharpness of the edges or the softness, or do I tend to make things more curved or more angular? I mean, if I'm feeling the wind and it's rough, make the viewer feel what I'm feeling in that painting. And there's so much passion when you're painting outside.
Well, this grizzly bear story you wanted to hear. Two of my artist friends and I went up to Glacier to paint. Tom English, he's a painter from Great Falls, Montana, and another friend of mine. We were up in Glacier, and we decided to go up to Many Glacier. That's an area of Glacier that's renowned for having lots of grizzlies around. So we went by this creek, and we were setting up. We set up to paint this mountain across the other side of this creek, and I was about 10 feet back, and the other two artists were right on the bank of the creek. And we just set up, and we were starting to block in our paintings. And my friend Tom says he thinks he sees a dog, but then he realized he's bear, and it's a grizzly, and it's coming down the creek towards us. And it got to about I would say about 20 feet away from us, and kind of looked at us and sniffed a little bit. I had bear spray. I got my bear spray out, and my other friend got his bear spray out. Tom got his camera out. He started photographing this bear that was about 15 feet away from him. And the bear just sniffed at us a little bit and then decided he would just keep moseying down the creek. Fortunately, the creek turned away from us, and he just kept going. But my heart just stopped, because he could have been on us in seconds. And this was a fairly young one. It was like an adolescent, I think, because it's just the way it looked. And they're the ones that are most dangerous, because they're the ones that the big bears kick out. They just get out of here. So they have a chip on their shoulder. But anyway, so Tom had these great photos of this bear. And if you go on my website, you'll see a painting that I did from this photo of this bear. And the story about this is on my website, too.
I have an interesting observation about painting outside and wildlife, especially bears. And that is, if you go back, I don't ever remember hearing or reading about, and talking to my dad, who was a painter too, reading about a PleinAir painter that's standing there so still. Now, if you're walking on the trail, that's something else. But if you've got your paints all out and your solvents and everything, and you're painting, I've never heard, and I could be proven wrong, but I asked a lot of people and never read of any PleinAir artist getting hurt by a bear. And I think my theory is that the solvents and the paint fumes, their smelling ability is, I forget, 10,000 stronger than ours. It's like a dog is 1,000 times stronger or something like that. It's just really, really strong. And I think that if you're not showing any aggression and you're standing still, or I've been sitting sometimes on the ground when I was doing watercolors, that the smell of what we're working with, even if we can't smell it, is enough that they're not interested. And I don't know if that's a good thing to tell people to be aware of. I think it's always a good idea to carry bear spray. And I don't think that women, this is my old-fashioned thing, but I just don't think women should paint alone. Get a buddy, be in a buddy system, and be sure that you have your cell phones with you. I love painting plein air. That's probably my strongest passion, is being outside and capturing the world. It doesn't matter whether it's the city or a landscape, waterfall, ice. It doesn't matter what season, water. It's just...
Yeah, another experience I had painting alone, when I was in New Mexico, we used to, as groups, go out to these little small towns. When I had this one painting that I liked that I wanted to continue and nobody was available, so I went out alone to paint it. And I was on this hillside, so I get up on this hillside, set up my stuff, and I'm painting away. These two guys ride up on horseback, and they start rearing the horses up and shooting guns, live ammo, up in the air, hooping and hollering like you see in the Western movies. And, where was I going to go? I had all my stuff was all set up. I was there, I wasn't going anywhere with anything. So I just kind of smiled at them and said, "How you doing?" And they just rode off. They just wanted to, scare the hell out of me. So,
well, you never know. I was out on a road by myself. I don't even remember where it was, and a truckload of looked like 20-year-olds, and there 3 or 4 of them in the back of a pickup truck, and they drove by me, and as they drove by me, they yelled out some pretty derogatory stuff, and then I kind of looked, and they got down the road a little bit, and the brake lights came on. I thought, they're just going to come back and beat the crap out of me. So I literally opened up the hatch and threw everything in and took off, and they chased me. Fortunately, they eventually stopped, but I thought, sometimes it's probably best to be careful about where you're painting and painting alone. Guys, this is so much fun, and
I know.
I love just kind of chatting about painting. And we're going to run out of time before we know it. So one of the things I'd like to touch on are essential things that you try to put in the brains of your students, because you both do a lot of teaching, or have certainly. If I were to go to one of your workshops, what's going to be different? What am I going to learn from you, Susan, and then from you, Howard?
One of the things that I've been concentrating on the last few years is gradation concepts. I even have wrote the notes to do a book, and I have it all scaled out, but I haven't gotten around to it, and I don't know if
well, let me know when it's time. It's something I might
will. Do. Okay. Well, so this gradation concept is thinking beyond. It organizes your composition, your colors, the whole thing. But thinking in a big concept first. In other words, look at your painting. Would it be better if you organized the values to go from dark to light toward the focal point, or large shapes to small shapes, or muted colors to bright colors right at the focal point? And I've got about 42 different concepts, and it blows people's mind. My biggest problem at workshops now is I want to give them all of it, and they can't absorb it. It's like handing them a fire hydrant and saying, "Would you like a cup of water?" Yeah. It just gets soaked. But it's very exciting to use in paintings. And I'm a real traditionalist. Both of us have been trained classically in color theory and composition and repetition of form and all of this. But this whole concept that I'm calling gradation theory, and gradation concepts for your paintings is so exciting, and it changes a painting that is okay to wow.
So can you try and articulate it a little bit more? I know there's so much to it, but give me you touched on it, but give me a little bit more depth behind that, so the people listening can understand some part of it.
Okay, so let's just take large shapes to small shapes. When I'm saying large shapes, I'm talking about everything that's away from the focal point. And then small shapes, we're getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and then we get to the focal point. So if you're doing plein air and you're standing outside, and which you would be, everything is small shapes out there because you're standing at a distance or across the road looking at a scene or something. Pull some trees closer to you, some great big trees, so that you go from this large shapes, and the clouds could be big at the top of the painting and then get smaller to little wisps down at the horizon if that's where your focal point is, or if it's like dull colors.
But isn't that just perspective?
No, because when you're standing there, it's not happening. So it's about design and it's about creating. No, it doesn't even have to be about perspective, because let's say it's something in the foreground that you want to emphasize. So you keep your background in big, simple shapes, and then as you get toward this fawn in the foreground, you start getting your shapes smaller and smaller. What happens is the viewer's eye is excited by changing of gradation, whether it's going from blue to orange in the transition, or large shapes, smaller to small shapes, or dark to light, or
that one thing.
yeah, well, you don't even have to. You can pick several of these concepts, and it's so fun to challenge yourself with these. I think it's because I have spent my entire life around art and artists that I see this as a way of, the ultimate way of getting really involved with my painting. And it's not just saying what's out there and trying to copy it, but it's the ultimate way of designing for me. And so that's what I've been all about lately.
That's
and
interesting. You know, it's very rare that I hear a new concept that I've never heard or understood before.
That's why I want to write the book. I mean, that's why I want to do this book. I have it all down.
Yeah,
and then
well,
you can
we'll
examples
talk.
of paintings. Yeah, okay. But there are paintings. It's fun to think of one concept like dark to light, and then start looking at paintings and go, oh my gosh, they used that. Or, oh my gosh, they didn't use that.
Well, do you think they do? You think people have done it intentionally? Is this something,
No.
if you've looked at historic paintings, it's just something that kind of happened in some cases?
I think it's intuitive. I think they like it because it's a more powerful painting, but I don't think they've consciously done it. And my whole goal is to bring it up to the consciousness of other artists so that it becomes subconscious and we do it naturally, which is what's been happening forever. And I just am real excited to be able to point it out.
Okay, Howard, how do you top that?
Yeah, I don't try. I never try. That's why we've been married for 22 years.
He's a good painter.
Yeah. Well, I guess what I want a lot of my students, a lot of them know the fundamentals, but I really try to hammer home the importance of continuing to develop those skills, the compositional skills, being able to assess values accurately, color theory, as far as understanding how to mix the colors, edges, and all that. Because I feel that if somebody strengthens those skills, the drawing skills, for instance, you strengthen all of those fundamental skills constantly. Every painting, looking to each painting to strengthen those skills, then you have a vocabulary that you can translate the visual universe or whatever you see out there, whether it's still lifes, landscape, figurative. You have tools to be able to work out. It's nothing new. It's the same old thing, but
a lot of people are not doing it.
Yeah, especially people who think they have it down, want to make a pretty painting, want to make and they have some image in their head of, what a good painting is, and they try, like, I guess when I was first starting out, my mentor is a man named William Schultz. He was the guy who started the Impressionist Society. So he was my first painting mentor. And I remember being in a workshop with him, and I was painting a still life. And at the time, I was reading books on from Ramon Kelly. I was enamored with his work and a bunch of the other artists, and I love their style. So what I was trying to do in his workshop is try to replicate their style. And I was, kind of fumbling around, and he came over to me. He had his way of approaching teaching. It was a step-by-step procedure, which was, I think, very helpful for people who are just beginning. But I was kind of going off the reservation, so to speak, with what he was teaching and trying to do some of this stuff that I was enjoying in some of these other books. And he said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm just experimenting." And he said, "Experiment on your own time."
Oh.
So basically what he was saying is pay attention to what's in front of you and don't try to make a picture out of it. You know what I mean? Just interpret what's right in front of you using these fundamental tools, and you will learn how to see. So basically what I guess by that story, what I'm trying to say is be honest with your subject. Try to be as accurate as you can be, but as far as style, a style will find you. If you're trying to paint in a particular style, you're missing the point. You're missing what's in front of you. Your style is like your handwriting. You can't help but paint like yourself. If you just, pay attention and observe what's in front of you, it'll come out like you, and trying to paint like other people. Well, I'm getting off on a tangent here. What you're saying is, what do I focus on in my workshops? Just the fundamentals, getting accurate, being able to see values is the key. If you can see the values, you can paint a black and white version of what it is you're painting. And it could be powerful. It could be extremely powerful if you're nailing those values correctly.
Well, I think what you've done is you said something that I thought was extremely valuable, because this question comes up all the time. How do you find your style? And the idea that your style finds you is, quite frankly, so much of a relief, because
it really is.
I'm not so sure I've ever found mine. And of course, part of my problem is I'm seduced by so many different approaches. One day I want to paint tight, another day I want to paint loose, and one day I want to do portraits.
That's you. That's okay, because that's what you don't have to. What do you call it?
Compartmentalize. You don't have to push yourself down. I mean, to me, what I tell my students is study how somebody does loose, study how somebody does tight. Every time you study that, it becomes a tool in your toolbox. And you may have a painting that starts out loose, and then there's another one, and then goes to a tight area in the painting. And because you studied these other artists, all that's really good. And like Howard was saying, that the fact that you can do it means that you have a lot of tools in your toolbox, and that's who you are.
One of the things I have my video that I have out currently is how to paint loosely but accurately. So loosely doesn't mean that your drawing is off. It just means that your drawing is off. You could have accurate drawing and apply the paint in a free and loose application. So as far as style is concerned, if you're thinking about style, that's going to influence your painting. If you just forget about it, well, let me go back. When I first got started, like I said, I was trying to emulate a lot of artists, and I was trying to paint just like them, because that's the only, as far as the landscape, that's the only reference I had from. And then I started seeing other artists who I admire, Clyde Aspavig, who is our neighbor in Montana, and Scott Christensen and Matt Smith, and some of these other artists. I'm influenced. Everybody's influenced, but it's still going to come out like you. You can take workshops and try to paint just like the instructor, but when you get back to your studio, you're going to revert back to who you are, and that's a good thing. So the thing I think is mostly about building some confidence in the way you see things, what you like to paint, and the way you like to paint it. Once I started to realize that I was good enough, and I was getting some awards and accolades, and people were saying they liked my work, then it freed me up a lot to just not worry about having a glossy, professional look. I just paint the way I want to paint.
Yeah.
One of the things is going to museums, you look at some of the masters and you realize that none of them paint like any of the other ones. That they all have their own thing. And I've looked at some master paintings and some of the chances they took. And it has to be fun. You have to make it fun, and you have to take chances, and you have to, not all of them are going to come out. Some of them are going to be dogs, and we all have stacks of those. But all we see in the magazines and online are the successes.
Yeah.
So you just have to give yourself a little bit of a break a lot of times. And I used to pull my hair out and be very, very upset with myself if the painting was going south. As I got older, I realized that it's all good. It all counts. Ultimately, you're gonna when you start out, you have more failures than successes. Many, many more failures. If you can get one painting that you want to frame, that's great. And then a little later on, maybe there's a few more. And as you start, the more you do it, the better the numbers count gets. And but you never get to everything is going to be frameable.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing, because if it is, that means you're not trying. That means you're not looking, giving yourself a chance to fail or to just make a breakthrough.
Got to push yourself.
Another thing that I tell my students is you've got to decide fairly early, but after you get the basics down, but decide what kind of a artist are you. And I use the analogy of, are you a reporter? You're just getting the facts down, the facts, this is a tree, this is what it was. That's quite often how we start. We feel successful if that looks like a tree. Or are you a novelist where you tell a lot of stuff? There's just all kinds of stuff going on in your picture, and you finally get to the climax of the picture, the drama, the ta-da, but there's a lot going on. Or are you a poet? And that is that you've got enough mystery, you say enough in there that a person can project their own emotions and their own feelings into it, and then you tell them a little bit. And I even challenge them, I say, try to be a haiku poem that only says a few things. And then I tell people to be artists of mystery, because I think when we first get started, we're trying to make sure that everybody knows we're an artist, and we prove it to ourselves by painting every single thing that's in front of us. And I think the wisdom comes when we realize that we can say more by painting less.
Yeah.
And with each individual person, it's how much do you want to say or how little do you want to say, but don't try to be so factual where you're telling everything.
Well, that's a great stopping point, because that's great advice. I think that we're at some point in the future going to have a part 2 or a part 3, because there's so much wisdom the two of you have to offer. I really appreciate the both of you being on the podcast today.
We appreciate being asked, and you and all you're doing for what we love doing. And
absolutely.
Boy, we can't wait to get together with you again sometime and paint together this next time.
What you've been doing for the whole art community, and it stretches out way outside of the borders of the United States. Obviously, you're going into these other countries, but this has been a huge movement that you have created in history. And we're all the benefactors of this, and we just thank you and cheering you on. So
well, that's very sweet of you. I
I
didn't create anything. I'm just kind of reflecting it, but that's very sweet of you.
No, you are a guy with vision. You have visions that are unbelievably out there, and then you make them happen. And we're cheering you on. Great.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you guys both being on the podcast. Maybe you'll come to the Adirondacks or something and
I
paint
hope
with
so.
us. All right.
That'd be great.
That'd be fun.
Okay. Thanks a lot.
Thank you again to Susan and Howard, and they're really great people. I've really spent a lot of time with them in the past, but not so much recently. Susan painted my portrait on stage at the PleinAir convention one year. I haven't seen it in a long time. I think she still probably has it. Anyway, you ready for some marketing ideas?
This is the Marketing Minute with Eric Rhoads, author of the #1 Amazon bestseller, Make More Money Selling Your Art, Proven Techniques to Turn Your Passion into Profit.
In the Marketing Minute, I answer your art marketing questions, and all you got to do is email them to me, eric@artmarketing.com. That's also a great resource for blogs and marketing ideas, artmarketing.com. But email me, eric@artmarketing.com. Here's a question from Justin in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, who says, how do I stand out other than with the quality of my art? How do I get folks excited and enticed to buy my work when there are so many others to choose from? Clearly, art marketing success goes well beyond the art itself. I've sent out announcements to past collectors and the response is non-existent. Well, Justin, there's a lot to all of these things. But first off, there are lots of questions in what you're saying. I'll drill down here. First, I'm a big quality guy. Quality should matter, but sometimes quality is a matter of opinion, right? We've all seen paintings that we never understand why they sell or why they get a recognition or why they're famous. I won't mention any names, but I saw a painting by a famous artist the other day, and I thought, this is like third grade work. But that's their thing. Anyway, so we can't necessarily understand it, but we do want to do the best quality we know how to do and try to always elevate our quality and try to always learn and get better. Paintings sell because they create emotional responses. Sometimes they stimulate a memory of a childhood or a thought or a place, just fond memories. Creating emotional responses about having an emotional response when you paint it. Paint the emotion that you feel, and that will help people connect with you. So if you love it, somebody else probably will too. And of course, in my first art marketing video, I talked about the importance of telling stories and how to tell them. Stories will help sell paintings. I've often attached stories to the backs of my paintings, give them to the galleries so the galleries can tell the stories, and it helps people connect. There's 4 different personality types, and some types can see things and will buy immediately. Others need to be nudged. They need a little reassurance, or they need stories to help them connect. That's why trained salespeople are really important, because salespeople know how to read customers, get them engaged, ask them questions, talk to them about things without being pushy. You want to be ethical and not pushy. And they oftentimes will tell stories, but there is a crafting of stories that takes place, part reality, part fantasy, which I go into in that video. But you start with stories and people will help connect. It's also true people have lots to choose from, but there could be 1,000 paintings in a gallery. You could walk in and one will stand out and you are emotionally stuck on it. Now, the key then is getting that person who's emotionally stuck on it to buy it. That's where some sales training comes in. But quite frankly, it's just a matter of engaging people, getting them to talk about it. Don't talk to them so much. Don't give them a bunch of spiel that makes them want to walk away. Ask them questions. Ask them, well, you seem to be interested in that painting. Tell me about it. What are you seeing in there? Is it stimulating a memory or a thought? And get them talking about it. That can help. And then also good salespeople can direct people to buy. Art marketing success does go beyond art itself. The key to marketing is to create desire, is to create exposure. Sometimes people need to see things time and time and time again. They need to know you. They need to know your brand. They have to feel comfortable with you. All of that ties into it. You've got to draw attention to your art, to yourself. Marketing can be about making it feel important or special or exclusive too. So announcements oftentimes fall flat. You mentioned announcements. They fall flat. They usually don't work because usually they're dull and they're boring and they're all about you and they're not about the reader. But also, you got to keep in mind that you got to find different ways to get these announcements in people's heads so they can see them. Frequency sells things, repetition sells things, and you want to have the ability to remind people. If you send something out a month in advance and then, you get no response, you send it out again and again. I developed a program that I call Art Marketing in a Box, and it's designed for artists who want to become kind of like local superstars and to sell locally. And it has a lot of repetition instruments in it to give you opportunities to be in front of people on a regular basis. Hope that helps. The next question is from an anonymous reader, understanding why here. The person says, I'm going through a crazy, stressful situation with a gallery not sending my art back to me. They've represented me for 19 months without a sale, not come through on their promises, and have not sent my art to me when I've asked them over a month ago. They have over $20,000 worth of art. Well, to anonymous, I'd say, I'm sorry, I've had it happen. I once had my photography in a gallery in Seattle, and the gallery disappeared. I didn't live in town. I didn't even know it for a long time. And I lost all my artwork. Interestingly, I was at a cocktail party somewhere, not even in Seattle, and the guy said, you know, your name sounds familiar. Were you in a gallery in Seattle? I said, yeah, years ago, 20 years ago. He said, well, my brother owned that gallery. He was looking for you. He said, give me your address. I'll get all your artwork back. And I got it all back, surprisingly. So sometimes things are misunderstandings. But anyway, to this particular question, there's a lot to it. But first, I always recommend you have to have a gallery agreement, which states things like what happens if they go bankrupt, what happens if you want your artwork back, who pays for shipping, who does what, and how is it framed. My gallery has, it has to have hooks on the back. It has to be ready, that kind of a thing. Secondly, you say you've been 19 months without a sale, but do you really know that? Maybe they sold some and they kept the money and haven't paid you. Oftentimes galleries will get into the situation where they don't really know how to manage their money, and so they get some money in, they pay their light bill, and then they realize, oh, I can't pay you, and they're intending to pay you. They get some other money in, then they've got their advertising bill. So reputable experienced galleries typically don't do that, but sometimes new galleries do, and they're well-meaning. They just get themselves in trouble. They don't know how to handle their money. So you got to work with them. But you could have somebody secret shop to see if your work is hanging, or you can go on the website and find out, maybe you can find out if it's sold. But most importantly is don't be sneaky. I don't think you have to be sneaky. There probably was not a sale, but maybe they're just ignoring you. It's hard to know. The best is not to sneak around. Just give it some more time. Call them a few more times. Don't be angry. Just mention that you feel like things aren't working out and you'd like to pull out. How can we arrange that? Don't be a jerk, because if you're a jerk, they won't want to talk to you. And you might even say, look, if you've sold my work and you just weren't able to pay me for whatever reason, we can work something out, but let's just get this worked out. I want to get the rest of my work out of there. And maybe they'll talk to you, maybe they don't. If that doesn't work, if you've gone to the website, your stuff's still up there, they're still in business, you've verified that, you can send a registered letter, maybe have an attorney politely ask them to respond within so many days, and don't make threats. It's not necessary, but they'll get the point. And then if that doesn't work, you can go in and make a threat, I suppose. That's why contracts matter. You want to have something in writing. If you sue for your work, if you don't have a contract, you're not likely to get it, especially if there's a bankruptcy. So you got to have a contract. I think that's the best thing. There's no reason to be nasty or unbusinesslike. You have a reputation to uphold even if they don't. So be nice, be civilized. Also, you could drop in and simply say, I'm here to pick up my work. I had a client who owed me $18,000 one time. They wouldn't pay me. They wouldn't take my calls. I tried and tried and tried. So I got on an airplane. I flew to them. And I went in at 8 o'clock in the morning. I said, hey, I'm here to pick up my $18,000. They said, well, we don't have it. I said, well, I've been calling. It's past due. You've been, I'm not a bank. I've got my payroll I can't make, and I need you to pay me. And they said, well, we can't. I said, well, I'm going to just sit here quietly, and I'll just wait till you bring me a check. And they said, we're not bringing you a check. I said, well, I'll sit here all day if I need to. So I sat there all day till 5 or 6 o'clock at night. They're closing up the office. They said, sir, you need to leave. I said, I'm sorry, I can't. And they said, well, we're closing the office. I said, that's fine, I'll sleep here. And they said, no, you can't. I said, well, why don't you call the police? And then you can have me removed. And so they got angry and they went in, they cut the check, and they said, we'll never do business with you again. I said, I understand that, but quite frankly, I don't want to do business with people who do business this way and don't pay me. So I got my money, and sometimes that's what it takes. I'm not suggesting that, but sometimes you have to be firm. But be professional where you can, be nice, be civilized. You don't want to do something you'll later regret. Anyway, That's the Marketing Minute. I hope you enjoyed it.
This has been the Marketing Minute with Eric Rhoads. You can learn more at artmarketing.com.
A reminder to sign up for the rescheduled PleinAir Convention in August in Santa Fe. Just go to pleinairconvention.com. Also to enter the extended PleinAir Salon Art Competition, your chance to win the cover of PleinAir magazine and $15,000 in cash for the main prize, and there's other cash prizes. That's at pleinairsalon.com. I've got this blog, gets a lot of readers. I do it on Sunday morning, and it's just kind of life and philosophy. It's called Sunday Coffee. Sometimes it's about art, and you can find it at coffeewitheric.com. This is always fun and interesting for me. Let's do it again sometime like next week. I will see you then, God willing. I'm Eric Rhoads, publisher and founder of PleinAir magazine. Remember, it's a big world out there. Go paint it, but don't put yourself at risk. Bye-bye.
This has been the PleinAir Podcast with PleinAir Magazine's Eric Rhoads. You can help spread the word about PleinAir painting by sharing this podcast with your friends. And you can leave a review or subscribe on iTunes so it comes to you every week. And you can even reach Eric by email, eric@pleinairmagazine.com. Be sure to pick up our free ebook, 240 PleinAir painting tips by some of America's top painters. It's free at pleinairtips.com. Tune in next week for more great interviews. Thanks for listening.